Hello, my dear students. Today, inshallah, I'm with you to give you some detailed description about chapter 16, to give you also some character sketches, character analysis about some characters in the novel, major characters, important characters, and also we will wrap up some of the past events. Let's start. As we know, Charles Dickens, the writer of the novel, expresses many contradictions in the period between both England and France. In France, the rulers are on and only few people had the best of life and great wealth, but the most people were suffering and their life was hard. Most of French were farmers, they lived in a miserable poverty, they didn't own the land they worked on, but rented it from the nobles. They were forced to pay heavy taxes. And as Charles Dickens started, he gives some contradictions, as we said. It was the best of times, it was the age of wisdom, season of light, time of belief, and spring of hope. This is for the aristocrats or the rich people. And it was the worst of times, it was the age of foolishness, season of darkness, time of disbelief, and the winter of despair, of course, for the poor people who are living in poverty, and as we call them, the mob. Actually, A Tale of Two Cities takes place over a period about 18 years before the beginning of the French Revolution. Now let's start our character analysis. The first character sketch is about Charles Darnay. Who was Charles Darnay? He is not a British patriot. He is Charles Evrémonde, nephew of the Marquis Evrémonde. Charles Darnay is a symbol of nobility. When the Marquis was killed by Gaspard, Charles became the Marquis in people's eye, and he had to therefore take the blame for the Marquis' wrongdoings. Charles Darnay had a very important quotation in the novel when he said, "Our family did a world of wrong, injuring every human creature who came between us and our pleasure, whatever it was." Charles Darnay left everything and traveled to England, and he started his own work by his own arm. He started as a French tutor, so he earns his living from his arm. He leaves everything that relates to his family, and also he leaves his name. Instead of Charles Evrémonde, he became Charles Darnay. And later, he became Dr. Manette's daughter's husband. In the early chapters, Charles Darnay in London was accused of being a spy and of helping the French king in his wars against the King of England. He was accused of traveling between England and France and informing the French of what armies the King of England was preparing to send. 6 witnesses were brought to testify against him. John Barsad, Lucy Manette, Dr. Manette, and Mr. Lorry were some of them. Darnay's lawyer proves that Charles Darnay was a victim or an innocent whose secret family affairs caused him to travel between the two countries. And also he was saved by the help of Sidney Carton, our next character. He was saved because of the great similarity between him and Sidney Carton. Although Darnay was a member of a noble family, he didn't like the bad ways his uncle was doing to the poor people. The second character sketch is about Sidney Carton. As I said about him, he's the protagonist. He's the real hero of the novel. I think that Sidney Carton is just like a flashlight. The flashlight doesn't seem that essential until an event happens, like a blackout, and then this flashlight seems critical for the rest of your life. Charles Darnay doesn't seem like the protagonist figure until the middle of the novel. It started to be Sidney Carton, the protagonist of the novel. Sidney Carton is a most dynamic and redeeming character. He was intelligent but wasted his talent through drinking. He falls in love with Lucy Manette, but in vain, with no hope because she loved Charles Darnay. But at last Sidney Carton became a theme of sacrifice because he will sacrifice himself saving Darnay and his life, and he will take Charles' place at the guillotine. The most important character here in the novel is Madame Defarge. During the Revolution, some lives will be lost, but those lives will not die in vain, but for a better future. These are some of Madame Defarge's opinions. In my opinion, she was a symbolic of fate. Madame Defarge's knitting, as she was stitching a registry, or a list of names of all those condemned to die, in the name of a new republic. Monsieur and Madame Defarge own a wine shop in Saint Antoine Street, in France, and they are extremely the starters and the starting point of the French Revolution. They own and sell wine or blood for the Revolution. They are the main starters and pushers for being violent. I think the wine shop represents the place where the people are getting their motivation to rebel from. Madame Defarge's knitting was a mythological feat. She used knitting to determine length of each person's life. She weaves the fate of the lives of those whose names she knits. Let's wrap up some of the events before chapter 16. Charles Darnay received a letter from Gabble, the old faithful servant of Evermont's family. He has been imprisoned because he was helping an emigrant. He means Charles Darnay. In his letter he begs Darnay to come and save him, since the only crime he committed was to follow Darnay's orders. Darnay decides to go back to Paris to save Gabble and to try to undo some of the wrongs done by his family. Charles Darnay leaves to France without informing anyone about his departure, but he left just 2 letters, one to Dr. Manette and another to his wife, Lucy Manette. Charles Darnay had a very difficult trip. It was tiring, because at every town gate, Charles Darnay is taken inside to another officer, who confirms that the prisoner is an Evermond, and is told that he will be assigned to La Force prison. Darnay tries to explain himself, but the officer tells him that he has no rights. Darnay is instructed to follow Defarge, who inquires if he is the Evermond who was married to Dr. Manette's daughter. When Darnay replies in affirmative, Defarge reveals the question. He asked him what was the reason for coming to France, and Darnay states that he has already explained himself. He came here to save Gabble. Now Monsieur Defarge brings a message to Mr. Lorry from Dr. Manette, who was working inside La Force prison to be beside Charles Darnay to take care of him. The message is stating that Darnay is safe. There is also another message from Darnay to his wife Lucy. As Mr. Lorry sets out to receive the message from Monsieur Defarge, he saw 2 women knitting in the courtyard. One is Madame Defarge, and the other is the Vengeance, a very cruel woman. They accompanied Defarge and Mr. Lorry. Lucy was delighted to receive Darnay's letter, which asks her to have courage and reminds her that her father has influence among people because of his good reputation. But Lucy didn't feel comfort with Madame Defarge. She looks at the woman in terrified manner. She was afraid of her.